The entire departure terminal of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport ground to an uneasy halt as a gate agent's sharp, carrying voice cut through the ambient roar of rolling luggage and overhead announcements. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside. This boarding lane is for first-class passengers only." The woman being addressed had not moved an inch. She stood at the entrance to the jetway with the particular stillness of someone who had long ago that the people how the loudest in a crisis are almost never the most dangerous ones in the room. Her name was Lieutenant Colonel Raina Ibarra Solis, and at 41 years old, she had flown combat medevac missions over 3 active war zones, performed emergency surgery on a collapsed lung at 11,000 feet during a firefight in the Kunar province, and once kept 8 soldiers alive in a blown-out firebase for 19 hours until extraction was possible. She had done all of that without raising her voice above a calm instructional tone. She was not going to raise it now. She was dressed simply, dark slacks, a fitted ivory blouse, a single strand of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. Her carry-on was understated, a matte charcoal rolling bag with no designer logo, no status symbol stitched into the fabric. She had not worn her uniform. She rarely did when she traveled commercially. She believed that authority was something you carried inside you, not something you pinned to your chest. Her boarding pass was in her left hand, seat 2A, Washington Dulles, non-stop. She had a briefing at the Pentagon in 14 hours. The gate agent's name, according to the badge clipped crookedly to his lapel, was Troy Stemple. He was 26 years old, a compact, restless young man with a deeply unfortunate tendency to mistake a company polo shirt for a uniform of genuine power. He had worked this particular gate for 11 months, long enough to develop ironclad opinions about who belonged in the first-class boarding lane, and who was, as he privately phrased it in his own head, trying something. Raina Ibarra Solis, to Troy Stemple's eye, was trying something. He had watched her walk up with the kind of calm, unhurried confidence that he instinctively read as a challenge. She hadn't deferred to him. She hadn't smiled the wide, appeasing smile that he subconsciously expected. She had simply presented herself at the lane, boarding pass in hand, and waited. And something about that, the ease of it, the absolute lack of performance, made his jaw tighten. "Ma'am." He repeated the word with pointed emphasis, stepping slightly in front of her. "I said this lane is for premium customers. You'll need to wait in the main boarding group. I have a first-class boarding pass." Raina said it simply, without heat, the way you state a fact about the weather. Stemple reached out his hand. "Let me see that." She handed it to him. He studied it for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. 4, 5, 6 full seconds, scanning it with the deliberate slowness of someone hoping to find an error that would justify what he had already decided. There was no error. The barcode was valid. The seat assignment was confirmed. The name was printed clearly. He handed it back. "There may be a system issue," he said, pivoting smoothly into bureaucratic ambiguity. "I'm going to need you to step to the side while I verify your ticket with my supervisor. My ticket just scanned without issue in your hand. It's a routine verification." He gestured toward a strip of carpet beside the service counter, an arm's length from the boarding lane, close enough to observe but clearly removed, positioned like a visual footnote. "It'll only take a moment." The couple behind Raina in line, a white man in his 60s wearing a golf jacket and his wife, watched the exchange with visible discomfort, their eyes moving between the gate agent and the woman being redirected. They said nothing. A young man 3 places back quietly lifted his phone. Raina Ibarra Solis did not move to the designated strip of carpet. She took a single small step to the left, enough to clear the path for other passengers, but she did not go where she had been pointed. She clasped her boarding pass in both hands, held it loosely, and waited. Stemple's supervisor, a woman named Carla, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and the chronically exhausted expression of someone managing 15 people's problems simultaneously, had been walking toward them already. She had seen the interaction from the service counter, and something in her stomach had clenched. She had seen Troy do this before. Not this exact thing, but the shape of it, the profile of it. She had written him up once, 8 months ago, for discourteous conduct toward a passenger. The formal language had not come close to capturing what she had actually witnessed. "What's the issue here?" Carla asked, arriving at Stemple's elbow. "Potential ticket irregularity," he said, without looking at her. His eyes were still on Raina. I was asking this passenger to step aside while we verify. I already scanned her boarding pass, Carla said slowly. Not through the secondary system. Carla looked at him. There was no secondary system for ticket verification at this gate, and both of them knew it. Raina watched this small, quiet exchange with the analytical attentiveness of someone trained to read the dynamics of a room. She understood immediately what was happening. She had been understanding it for 20 years. She understood it from the first second Troy Stemple's eyes had landed on her and made their calculation. She was not surprised. She was not frightened. She was simply, quietly, furious in the way that had nowhere to go. The controlled, compressed fury of someone who has been told, in 1,000 different non-verbal vocabularies, that the world was not built for them to move through it without friction. "Ma'am," Stemple said, his voice dropping lower now, more private, leaning in with the studied intimacy of someone delivering what he believed was a reasonable warning. "I'm going to be direct with you. I have the authority to delay this boarding process if I feel a situation warrants it. I strongly recommend you cooperate." The word cooperate landed in the air between them with a specific loaded gravity. "I am cooperating," Raina said. Her voice was still level. "I presented a valid boarding pass for the seat I purchased. I have not obstructed the lane. I have not raised my voice. I have not made a scene." A brief pause. "You have done 2 of those 3 things." Stemple's face flushed. He turned to Carla. "I need you to back me up here." Carla opened her mouth. She did not get the chance to answer. From the first-class seating area, a cluster of chairs cordoned off by a low fabric divider, 8 feet behind, and to the left of the boarding lane, a woman rose. She was perhaps 60 years old, silver-haired, compact and precise in her movements, wearing civilian, dark slacks, a charcoal blazer, a plain white shirt. No jewelry worth mentioning. She had been sitting with a carry-on bag and a cup of coffee, reviewing something on a government-issue tablet, and she had been watching the entire exchange over the rim of her reading glasses, with an expression of increasing, surgical calm. She was Brigadier General Cynthia Amara Osei, United States Army Medical Command, currently 3 weeks out from her confirmed nomination to Major General pending Senate confirmation. She had 32 years of service, 2 combat deployments, a Distinguished Service Medal, and a career record that had put her name on the short list for Surgeon General of the Army twice. She and Lieutenant Colonel Abara Solis had served together at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany 9 years prior. Raina had been one of the finest trauma surgeons Cynthia had ever overseen, and she had written the letter of recommendation that began Raina's accelerated promotion track. Cynthia Marose set down her coffee cup without hurry. She closed the cover of her tablet. She stood fully upright and walked the 8 feet to the boarding lane entrance with the kind of unhurried, zero-performance authority that made every person in the immediate vicinity go quiet without entirely knowing why. Troy Stemple registered her approach a half-second too late to recalibrate. "Excuse me," Cynthia said. She did not address Stemple. She addressed his supervisor. "I've been watching this interaction for approximately 4 minutes. Is there a documented irregularity with this passenger's boarding pass, or is your agent conducting what I am observing?" Carla's glasses dropped from her hair onto her nose. No, ma'am. The boarding pass is valid." Cynthia nodded once. Then she looked at Stemple, with the particular quality of gaze that she reserved, in her professional life, for people who had made very bad decisions that were about to become someone else's official problem. "What is your name?" she asked him. "Troy Stemple." He said it reflexively, before his brain had time to run the calculation of whether that was wise. "Mr. Stemple." Cynthia's voice was very quiet. It carried with absolute clarity to the 8 people in the immediate vicinity. "The woman you have been attempting to remove from this boarding lane is Lieutenant Colonel Raina Abara Solis, a combat trauma surgeon with 20 years of active duty service, currently traveling under confirmed orders to a Department of Defense medical briefing at the Pentagon." She paused. "She is also one of the most decorated flight surgeons currently serving in the United States Army." Stemple's expression passed through several phases in rapid succession. Skepticism clung to it the longest. "I don't have any way to verify that," he said. The words came out more weakly than he intended. "No," Cynthia agreed. "You don't. Because you didn't ask. You made a visual assessment the moment she walked up to this lane, decided it didn't match your expectations, and manufactured a procedural pretext to remove her." She tilted her head slightly. I would like you to think very carefully before you say another word, because I have been flying commercial for 32 years, and I know the difference between a ticket irregularity and what I just watched. Stempel looked at Carla. Carla had taken a visible step away from him, a small instinctive act of institutional self-preservation that spoke volumes. Raina, for her part, had not moved. She was watching the whole thing with her characteristic stillness, though something had shifted slightly in her posture. A fraction of relief, maybe. Or simply the acknowledgement that she would not have to carry this weight alone today. "Who are you?" Stempel asked Cynthia. His voice had gone defensive, retreating into the last trench available to him. Cynthia reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. She removed a small, government-issued identification card and held it up, not aggressively, not in his face, simply at a neutral angle where it was visible. Her rank, name and command were printed in clear black type on a DO'd common access card. Stempel looked at it. His eyes moved from the card to Cynthia's face, then back to the card, then to Raina, then to the gathering awareness that several people around him had their phones out. He said nothing. "My recommendation," Cynthia said, sliding the ID back into her pocket, "is that you step back from this lane and allow Lieutenant Colonel Abarasalis to board. I will be filing a detailed account of this interaction with your airline's executive offices and with the offices of the Inspector General of the Department of Transportation. If you have any statement you'd like included in that account, now would be the appropriate time to offer it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in Terminal E. Carla stepped fully forward, physically repositioning herself between Stempel and the boarding lane. "Ma'am," she said to Raina, "I am so sorry. Please." She extended an arm toward the jetway. "Right this way." Raina Abarasalis looked at Troy Stempel for exactly 2 seconds. It was not a look of anger. It was something quieter than that, and in some ways more devastating. The look of someone who is tired, who has been tired for a very long time, and who has decided that the person in front of them is simply not worth the energy of rage. Then she picked up the handle of her charcoal rolling bag, nodded to Cynthia with the brief, economical warmth of two people who understand each other completely, and walked down the jetway. The young man, 3 rows back in the boarding line, lowered his phone. He did not delete the video. Troy Stempel stood at the edge of the boarding lane and understood, in the specific marrow-deep way, that the body knows things before the brain accepts them, that his morning had just become the worst of his professional life. He had no idea yet that it was going to get considerably worse. Carla did not finish the boarding process before pulling Stempel from the gate. She called in a replacement agent from the adjacent gate, walked Stempel to a back office behind the service counter, and closed the door. What was said in that room in the next 6 minutes was not recorded, but 3 colleagues who walked past the closed door reported hearing Carla's voice at a volume they had never previously encountered from her. Stempel was removed from gate duty for the remainder of his shift and assigned to a ground operations role while an internal review was initiated. He was told not to contact any passengers involved in the incident. He went home that evening, believing the worst was behind him. He was catastrophically wrong. The video went up at 6:14 p.m. The young man who had filmed it was a graduate student named Bryant, who was heading home after a semester-end conference. His caption read, "Watched a gate agent try to block a black woman from first class for 4 minutes straight at ATL. Then this happened." He tagged the airline. He tagged 2 civil rights accounts he followed. He posted it and went to his gate. By the time his plane reached cruising altitude, the clip had 11,000 views. By the time he landed, it had 400,000. By midnight, it had crossed 2 million, and the airline's social media accounts had been buried under an avalanche of responses that their communications team, working in rotating emergency shifts, could not begin to contain. The video was clear and well lit, and damning in its specificity. You could see Troy Stempel's badge. You could see the boarding pass in Raina's hand. You could see the 6-second pause while he held her pass and searched for a problem that wasn't there. You could hear every word of the exchange, including the word cooperate, which had been clipped by someone else into a separate 15-second video that was circulating independently. At 7:43 a.m. the following morning, Raina Abarasalis stepped out of her Pentagon briefing for a 15-minute break and found 47 missed calls and a voicemail from the airline's senior vice president of customer experience, a man who had apparently not slept. She listened to the voicemail, set her phone face down on the conference table, and returned to the briefing. She would deal with it afterward. The airline issued a public statement at 9 a.m. It was inadequate. A second statement followed at 1 p.m. It was marginally less inadequate. By 3 p.m., the CEO had released a personal video apology. By 5 p.m., Troy Stemple had been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. None of this happened fast enough, and everyone involved knew it. What the public did not know yet, what was still being processed in the back corridors of the airline's legal department, was the full scope of what they were now dealing with. Because Brigadier General Cynthia Amara Osei had spent the previous evening doing exactly what she said she would do. She had filed a detailed written account of the incident with the airline's executive officers. She had also filed a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection, and she had made one phone call, a personal one, to a retired colleague who now served as general counsel to a Senate subcommittee that oversaw commercial aviation regulation. The call was brief and informational. The colleague asked 3 clarifying questions. Then they said, "Thank you, Cynthia," and hung up. The following Tuesday, the airline received a formal inquiry from that subcommittee requesting documentation of all passenger service complaints filed at Hartsfield-Jackson in the preceding 18 months, with particular attention to first-class boarding incidents. The legal department went very quiet. Troy Stemple, meanwhile, was not idle in his suspension. He had consulted 2 lawyers. The first had been honest with him, the second had been more accommodating, and he had retained the second. He had given an interview to a local news affiliate in which he described the incident as a misunderstanding and characterized himself as a dedicated employee being made into a scapegoat for a culture war. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening and generated roughly 1/10 the attention he had hoped for, and approximately 10 times the backlash. His former colleagues at the airline stopped returning his texts. The airline's internal investigation concluded in 19 days. The findings were not publicly released in their entirety, but their consequences were. Stemple's employment was terminated. The termination letter cited a documented pattern of inconsistent enforcement of boarding procedures along demographic lines. 3 other complaints in the preceding 14 months had been filed against him and quietly archived. He was told he would not receive a favorable reference. His access to the employee portal was revoked the same afternoon. 3 weeks after the incident, Raina Abara-Solis sat in a conference room at the Department of Defense with 2 JAG officers, the airline's senior VP, and their lead outside counsel. She had declined to pursue a civil lawsuit, a decision that surprised the airline's legal team, until she explained her reasoning with the same flat economy she applied to everything else. "I don't want your money," she told them. "I want a written policy with teeth, independent auditing of boarding enforcement data across your hubs, and a mandatory training program developed with input from an organization I will specify. Those are my terms." She slid a 1-page document across the table. "If those 3 things are implemented and verifiable within 6 months, I will sign a statement of resolution." The senior VP looked at the document. He looked at the JAG officers. He looked at the chair where Cynthia Amara Osei would have been sitting, had she chosen to attend. She had declined, sending instead a 1-paragraph written statement that the airline's counsel had read 3 times before forwarding to the CEO, with a note that said only, "This is not going away." The airline signed Raina's terms. 2 months later, Cynthia Amara Osei's nomination to Major General was confirmed by the Senate. She called Raina from the parking lot of the Capitol building, still in her service dress uniform, the confirmation papers in her other hand. "I heard about the settlement terms," Cynthia said. "It's not a settlement," Raina corrected her. "It's accountability." Cynthia was quiet for a moment. "You could have taken a number with a lot of zeros on it. So could you have?" Raina said. "Plenty of times." There was a pause between them, the kind that holds a great deal of shared and unspoken history. "How are you?" Cynthia asked. Raina thought about it honestly before she answered, because she was not a person who gave dishonest answers to questions she took seriously. "I'm tired," she said. "I've been tired for a long time. But I'm still here, and I'm going to keep being here." "Yes," Cynthia said. "You are." What Troy Stemple did not understand, what men and women like him almost never understand until it is too late, is that the assumptions he made at that boarding lane were not just morally wrong. They were strategically catastrophic. in a way that no amount of union protection or corporate bureaucracy could have shielded him from, because he had chosen his target based entirely on appearance, and he had guessed wrong in every conceivable direction. He had seen a black woman traveling alone with an understated bag, no visible status markers, no performance of wealth or deference, and he had calculated, with the confident arrogance of someone who had made this calculation many times before and faced no consequences, that she was vulnerable. He was not wrong that she had been made to feel vulnerable many times. He was devastatingly wrong to believe that vulnerability was the same as powerlessness. He was also wrong to believe that he had been careful enough, systematic enough, or invisible enough for it to matter. There was a Brigadier General 8 feet behind him, with 32 years of institutional knowledge, a government-issued ID, and a deeply thorough understanding of how to navigate every level of a formal complaint process. There were 2 JAG officers on speed dial. There were 14 months of unreviewed complaints from other passengers sitting in an archive that a Senate subcommittee was now examining. There was a graduate student with a fully charged phone and a clear sightline. There was, in other words, an entire infrastructure of justice that Troy Stemple had walked directly into, wearing his polo shirt and his borrowed authority, and it had closed around him like water filling a hole. Reina Ibarra-Solis did not attend his termination proceeding. She was in Germany for a medical consultation with NATO Allied Forces Command. She found out via a brief email from her JAG contact, read it during a layover in Frankfurt, and then put her phone away and ordered a coffee. She did not celebrate. Celebration felt beside the point. The man had lost his job. The airline had signed an accountability agreement. 14 months of buried complaints were being reviewed. That was not a celebration. That was a beginning, a small, grudging, hard-won beginning, the kind that was paid for by every time a person like Reina had stood at a boarding lane, or a front desk, or a courtroom, or a promotion board, and held herself together with both hands while someone decided whether she belonged. She drank her coffee. Her flight boarded on time. She sat in seat 2A. There is a particular kind of arrogance that mistakes composure for weakness, silence for acceptance, and quiet dignity for submission. It is the arrogance of people who have never been forced to develop genuine strength, who have relied so long on proximity to power that they have confused access to a polo shirt and a clipboard for authority itself. Troy Stemple was not an anomaly. He was a symptom of a system that had allowed small, scared, puffed-up people to sit in choke points of daily life and make other people smaller. And for a long time, that system had protected him. It did not protect him this time. And the reason it didn't, the reason the whole architecture of his defense collapsed in 19 days, is that Reina Ibarra-Solis did not fold. She did not perform submission to make him comfortable. She did not smile to de-escalate an encounter she had done nothing to escalate. She stood where she had every right to stand, and she waited. That is not a small thing. For a lot of people, in a lot of boarding lanes, and hotel lobbies, and hospital corridors, and conference rooms, it is the hardest thing in the world. If this story made you feel something real, if it reminded you of someone you know, or something you've seen, or something that has happened to you, hit the like button and share this video. The stories that don't make the national news still matter. The people who stand their ground without raising their voice still matter. Subscribe to Echoes of Justice and stay with us, because the next story is already waiting, and it is just as true and just as necessary as this one.